Hey, look, there's a Wild State Representative Walter Hudson in studio. Good morning, sir.
Hey, how's it going? Tripped my way in.
Yeah, no, what a surprise. I told you when you walked in I would have gotten dressed up. I'm theming my week. I haven't mentioned it on the air, but I'm wearing NASCAR shirts all week because things get underway in Daytona. We need the distractions in life.
Yeah, most definitely.
Before we dive into some legislative issues, I want to wrap up, and we can talk a little bit about this other bill that was moving through. This has actually gotten quite a bit of attention nationally. This former case manager in a Missouri pediatric clinic has been blowing the whistle on the morally and medically appalling treatment resulting in permanent harm being done to the children. Jamie Reed is a self-described queer leftist woman married to a transgender man, said that she is politically left of Bernie Sanders, and said when anybody raised doubts of how things were being run in this facility, they ran the risk of being called a transphobe. In 2019, Reed became aware of an increasing number of minors who regretted their medical transition, called detransitioners. She and a colleague tried to bring attention to the issue and track the data, but were met with resistance from doctors. Despite this, the author and the colleague created the red flag list to track the patients. Reed recalled a particularly sad case where a detransitioned teenage girl from an unstable family with a history of drug use who had undergone a double mastectomy to remove her breasts. After only 3 months, she regretted her decision. Reed and her colleague checked on the young girl and found out that she was pregnant. Of course, she'll never be able to breastfeed her child, Reed lamented. By the spring of 2020, Reed felt morally obligated to voice her growing concerns and began speaking up in the office and through email communications. And as a result, she began receiving negative performance reviews for the first time, noting her defensiveness and hostility when she received direction from management. Things came to a head at a half-day retreat in the summer of 22. In front of the team, the doctor said that my colleague and I had to stop questioning the medicine and the science as well as their authority. Then the administrator told us to get on board or get out. Reed finally left the Transgender Center in November of 2022 and decided to come forward when she felt stunned and sickened by comments made by Dr. Rachel Levine, the Transgender Assistant Secretary for the Health and Federal Department of Health and Human Services, who said the clinics are proceeding carefully and that no American children are receiving drugs or hormones for gender dysphoria who shouldn't. But I cannot in good conscience do so. She said, almost everyone in my life advised me to keep my head down, said Reed, because what is happening to the scores of children is far more important to my comfort, and what is happening to them morally and medically is appalling. She did write a letter to the Missouri Attorney General and is waiting to hear further response. She outlined basically what we laid out in the article. And I brought this in, Walter. The Bill Walsh and Center of the American Experiment had put out his notes on the Capitol from this week. And one of the items he talked about was the attempt to add abortion and transgenderism as part of the Explore Minnesota brand when it relates to tourism, including this trans refuge bill, SF-63. It got hearings, but apparently didn't make it out of committee. So, there. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Laying out some minefields for me this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I had intended to move through that quicker than before, but I didn't get a chance to. But I'm sure that you don't have an opinion on any of this whatsoever.
I have tons of opinions about all of it. And let me offer you a little bit of context. So after I leave here, I'm going to drive down to the Capitol and I'm going to go to my first committee meeting of the day. And we're going to be hearing testimony on a bill that is intended to maintain the family cohesion amongst tribal families of our Indian tribes here, our Native American tribes here in the state of Minnesota. Worthy cause. So that's what they're doing on the one hand. On the other hand, they have authored and heard in committee this bill, which intervenes in out-of-state parental custody battles in order to facilitate the kidnapping to poison and mutilate of children. That's what the bill does. That's what the bill provides. That is one of the problems I run into in this job with this session and this trifecta and this majority is when I say things like that, people think, oh, political exaggeration, rhetoric, talking point. That is a 100% accurate reflection of what this bill does. It enables the literal kidnapping of children by one parent from the other for the purpose of bringing them across state lines to poison and mutilate them. That's what it does. That's what the Democrats are about. The fact, and I get it. I understand why they are laying this over and potentially won't bring it to the floor, because I'm going to say this on the floor if they do, right? But even so, how does this see the light of day?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, how does this not get pulled immediately once it's introduced? The fact that this exists and the fact that they were willing to hear it tells you all you need to know about the content of their souls.
I'm so perplexed, and maybe it's just because I still, unfortunately, have a better view of people, but this I feel like they're moving through on these things because they have some sort of twisted. The only way I can describe it is sort of a twisted view of like libertarianism, where they want just the guardrails removed and they want all these things just left to individuals. Is it not that? I mean, explain it to me, because I don't understand how these individuals that got elected, they're not dumb. They're not dumb.
No. You are 100%.
These are intelligent individuals, and if they're just that morally lost, then maybe it's as simple as that. But perhaps you can explain it to me better.
Well, it's rebellion. Okay, I mean it's defiance against reality. There's a spiritual component to it. It's defiance against the Creator God, and it's the notion that with the sheer force of will, you can create and reshape reality. Now, there's a sense in which that's true, right? Like, we can look at a river and say, you know what would be great there? A dam.
Sure.
And then we can take action to reshape our environment in order to benefit ourselves. So there's a kernel of truth in that impulse, but they take it past the point of physical reality to this weird sort of metaphysical place where they think, if I, clench my eyes and squeeze hard enough, I can become something that I'm not. Or I can manifest in the world something that doesn't exist. One of the ways in which this has played out recently, I don't know if we talked about this last week, but one of the chairs of a committee in the legislature referred to one of the new state departments that they want to erect to govern children and families. We're going to have a State Department of your family now. When I mentioned, how much are we willing to spend for this? Is there any upward limit to how much you're willing to spend and tax for this? And his answer was, this is a magic money tree. That's the exact quote. This department will be a magic money tree, because they're operating under the economic theory, that you get a return on investment, an undefined ethereal return on investment for investing in early childhood. So what that means is there is no functional downside to just pouring as much money as you can conceive of. So that's another way in which they're trying to manifest their wishes into reality by saying, all we need to do in order to get money is think we're going to get money. And then we can bank on that.
And they feel completely emboldened because of the way that the election shook out. They feel as if that this is what everybody wanted. I mean, we've talked about on the show, I've highlighted on the show, and we won't, go into all of the instances and circumstances, but clearly, if you were paying attention, what was said on the campaign trail, what the Republicans were saying that the left was going to do, the DFL was going to do, has come to fruition. Mm-hmm. What they were saying they weren't going to do, no, those are crazy, radical extremists. It was the complete opposite. They were gaslighting. But I imagine at this point in time, they've all, as you've said, they've all convinced themselves now, we got the trifecta of power. This is what everybody wants us to do. We're going to radically transform the state as much as we possibly can.
I mean, they say things within 5 minutes that are completely contradictory. Last night on the House floor, we debated whether or not we ought to pour hundreds of thousands of additional dollars into the CCAP program. If that rings a bell, it's because 5 years ago in 2018, that was the center of $100 million worth of fraud involving allegations of money going overseas to fund terrorism.
Oh, yeah.
Out of your pocket.
I remember that.
Yes,
that's
yeah,
right.
that rings a bell, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So last night they put more money into that. And we're debating the extent of that fraud, and they're trying to question, well, it wasn't really $100 million, blah, blah, blah. But in one breath, they're saying there was no fraud. It doesn't exist. There's no evidence of fraud. In the next breath, like mere moments later, they're saying we've done things to combat fraud. And this bill here has provisions to address fraud. So they can't get their own story straight, and they don't even bother to try. When Jamie Long, the majority leader, gets up at the end of debate on a given bill, he usually doesn't address any of the things that we've actually said. He reads off a script and addresses the straw man that they wish we had said, right?
Right.
And because there is no interest in a good faith conversation, and there's certainly no interest in the reality which would inform that conversation.
I remember the conversations that you and I had prior to the election. Again, State Representative Walter Hudson joins us in studio. And there is there's a stark difference between when you and I talked then and the optimism, right? Okay. There is. I mean, we're friends. I know you and what you're faced with now. I'm curious where you're at the moment in terms of your role. Because prior to the election, I think we're going to do some good here in Minnesota, and
right.
we're now a month in this legislative session. We all know what's transpired. We've been talking about it. I'm just wondering, what is it that Walter Hudson is trying to do? What are you able to accomplish? How are you doing this job now, and how are you doing?
It's counterintuitive, but I find myself throughout the day with several moments of legitimate joy and laughter and fun. Usually in the company of my fellow Republican members as we're reflecting upon the contents of the day. But no, there is elation in the fight. Right. There's adrenaline that comes with the fight, and I enjoy it, but not for its own sake, not just to fight. I enjoy it because, I have the honor, as do my colleagues on our side of the aisle, of saying what is true and advocating for what is right. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it doesn't matter whether in the immediate moment. I mean, it does matter temporally.
Sure.
On the global scale, it matters. But personally, like as a person, all any of us can do is live faithfully within the sphere of influence that we've been granted, right? And that's what I'm doing. And I have this incredible opportunity to be able to do that almost every day, almost every moment of the day, to live right on that edge of where things matter and stand up and say the right thing, speak truth, and confront what I regard to be often, if not just wrong, outright evil. And that's very affirming, even when you're on the losing side of a given vote.
Well, I imagine it's very emboldening. I mean, not that you are. I was joking when he got in. I was letting Walter know what we're going to cover, and I said, "Yeah, I know you. Typically you don't have an opinion on anything."
Yeah.
But I imagine though the way that things have been shaping in the legislative session, there's a bit of, all right, fine, we want to go there, let's go there. There's not much you and the party can do just based off of the power dynamic within the legislative session. But I imagine now it's sort of like, all right, we're going to put it all out there. We're going to go and put it all out there. Not that I wouldn't expect you to have done that anyways.
Well, sure. But I would push back a little bit and say that we can do exactly what we're doing, which is let everybody know what's going on.
Sure.
And that does have an effect. They decided to lay that bill over, the trans refuge bill. It's on hold, according to Bill Walsh. We'll see what ends up happening with it ultimately. But there's other things that we've been hearing behind the scenes that I'm not going to share that indicate that there are cracks in the facade of partisan unity within the DFL, particularly over on the Senate side. And so we can have an influence. And when I say we, I mean you guys. You guys can have an influence. Like, I can let you know what's going on, but the folks out there are the ones who are actually going to have the impact by shaping the environment in which these folks are making their decisions. And you see that happening. One area in which it's happening is with this paid family medical leave atrocity that they're trying to pass through. Business owners are finally waking up to what this is going to do to them. 158 businesses in the Brainerd Lakes area sent a letter to the governor and to us legislators saying, hey, if you do this, you're going to destroy our community.
What time do you have to leave here? What time you got to get out of here by?
I might be able to go to the top of the hour.
Okay. We got just a few minutes here. We'll go a little bit long. I got two quick things for you before we let you go. I mentioned earlier, and I was wondering if you could add to the that stipulation as it relates to homeschool reporting of the test scores was removed. There was a voice of opposition.
That's another example.
And that's what I want. I know that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to, because I was trying to find a bright spot, and it seemed as if some voices were heard, and that was actually removed from the language of Walz's intent. From
and that's the Achilles heel, the downside of their. Anytime you try to defy reality, like if you think you can fly and you jump off a building, you're going to be corrected very quickly, right? Like your reality is going to confront you at several miles per hour. And that's to some extent what is happening to the DFL is their desire to reshape their reality was emboldened by the election results, and they didn't look at the granular detail. They didn't look at the fact that they barely won a couple of their statewide races. They didn't look at the fact that they barely won a lot of their legislative races. And they assumed that they had a mandate to go full crazy. And that's exactly what they've done to date for a solid month. And my guess would be that they're seeing some internal indications that Minnesotans are going along with.
Well, and this was going to be my next question. I know Robbie has one from a listener that had called in as well. Was, I know it's probably way too soon to tell, but the left typically when they grab power they overreach, and clearly that's what the DFL has been doing. And you answered that a bit. I'm just wondering. Is there going to be too much distance between now and the next election cycle? Are they going to be able to weather any sort of controversies that may have come? Because you still don't really have the media pointing this out. I mean, the Star Tribune kind of teetered there as it related to Walz's budget, but they didn't really go all in saying, oh, no, it's going to be expensive. That's about all that I expect out of the Star Tribune. But do you think there will be sort of electoral consequences, or is it just too soon to tell?
Well, again, it relies entirely on us, on the folks listening, and on me and my colleagues to get the information out and then to put in the work. This is going to require work. It's really easy. And, I had a show here and you show up here every day and we grump about everything, everything that's wrong in the world. But what's actually going to fix it is boring stuff, walking, knocking on doors. And we're going to have to be willing to find people who will cast ballots, and we're going to have to work the system by the rules that the DFL is writing. And that's how we're going to win. It's not going to be by crossing our fingers and hoping that they remember how crazy they were in 2023 early in the year. It's going to be by doing the work starting now all the way through the end of 2024. And consider, you want optimism? Here's your optimism. They barely won, as I just outlined, right? They barely won. They had to leverage everything to barely win. They outraised us 10-1. Okay. They have the media. We don't. They have all these institutional advantages. They fund their own political coffers through public dollars that get filtered and laundered through different organizations. They have so many institutional advantages, and it's barely enough to get them across the finish line. We don't even have to get our act entirely together. We just have to get it together.
Yeah, it's always the battle. It's always the struggle too. It's just you've got to push further, and it's not easy. And clearly, it's not easy. We have Robbie's got a question from a listener as well.
Yeah, somebody had called in from Bloomington and wanted to know the origination of the term "magic money tree."
So this was in a committee hearing. I believe it was Children and Families, and I forget what it was. We were just hearing a presentation about the governor's budget priorities surrounding basically his plan to start a new State Department to govern children and families, because we don't have enough state departments apparently. And Representative Natalie Zalesnikar, sorry, Natalie, from up in the northern part of the state, she just passively stated, hey, we don't have this magic money tree. Like, money doesn't just fall out of heaven. It's like your dad's logic, right?
Sure.
How many times have you heard that? Money doesn't grow on trees.
Right.
And Chairman Dave Pinto responds to her by chiding her and saying, there actually is a magic money tree. It's this right here. It's this proposal. 13% ROI. You can go and look at the clip. It's on my Twitter.
All right.
I mean,
we'll grab it.
He actually believes, and he went on to flesh it out. We had a conversation about economic theory. We continued it on the House floor last night. But they legitimately believe that there is no upward limitation on how much you should tax or spend, because you're going to get a return on that investment undefined at some point in the future. And so, and my point in response to that is, well, then why limit it to $12 million? Let's spend 100 quadrillion, right? Like,
right. Why stop?
Why ever stop? What number could possibly be too big if you're guaranteed a 13% return on investment?
All right. Well, I'll let you go back into the fight. Walter Hudson, state representative. Thank you, sir, for coming in. It was a pleasure to see you. It was a surprise, a welcome surprise. I appreciate it.
Yep.